I can't believe this is happening.
What did the note say?
This is awful.
I was standing at the altar in a $30,000 wedding dress, when the priest leaned toward me and whispered something that made my heart stop. The groom isn't coming. At first, I thought it was a joke. Mark Higgins would never do that to me. We had been together for 10 years. He had promised me forever. But when I looked toward the altar, I noticed something strange. The ring pillow was still there. But the rings were gone. Instead, there was a folded piece of paper. My hands trembled as I picked it up. Every guest in the church was watching me. Inside the note were just 5 words written in Mark's neat handwriting. I found a better life. The whispers began instantly. Because everyone already knew what those words meant. The better life was Lydia Sterling, the daughter of the richest billionaire in the city. Mark hadn't just abandoned me. He had traded me. For money. For power. For a life he thought was better. And as I stood there in front of 200 guests, humiliated and alone, I made a promise to myself. One day, he would regret that choice. 5 years later, nobody called me Lily Evans anymore. In the business world, I was known by a different name. Ellie Vance. CEO of the fastest growing tech company in the country. My company had just signed a $1 billion contract. My face appeared on magazine covers. Investors fought to work with me. But very few people knew the truth. Ellie Vance didn't exist 5 years ago. She was born the moment a bride was left standing alone at the altar. Pain can destroy a person. Or it can build them into something unstoppable. In my case, it did both. For 5 years, I worked harder than anyone around me. I changed my name. I moved to a new city. And I built an empire powerful enough that even the people who once laughed at me would have to bow their heads when they saw me. But there was one thing I had never forgotten. One person I had never forgiven. Mark Higgins. The man who chose a billionaire's daughter over the woman who loved him. For 5 years, I waited for the universe to deliver justice. And one rainy Tuesday morning, it finally did. Because my assistant walked into my office and said something that made my heart stop. The cleaning company here for the contract inspection has arrived. I nodded without looking up from my laptop. Then she added something else. The owner says he's desperate for this job. His company might collapse without it. I stood and walked toward the glass wall overlooking the lobby. And that's when I saw him. A tired man in a faded blue uniform. His hair slightly gray. His shoulders heavy. Holding a clipboard like his entire life depended on it. Mark Higgins. The man who left me for a better life. Was standing in my lobby. Begging for a job. And the woman who owned the building. Was the bride he abandoned. I watched him for a long moment through the one-way glass. 5 years ago, Mark looked like a prince in a tuxedo. Now he looked like a man who had been fighting a losing battle with life. His shoes were worn. His shoulders slouched. And the confidence I once admired in him was gone. Bring him in, I told my assistant. I sat down behind my massive desk and adjusted my glasses. When the door opened, Mark stepped inside slowly. He didn't look up at first. Thank you for seeing me, Ms. Vance, he said nervously. His voice had changed. It sounded tired. My company really needs this contract. I leaned back in my chair. Luck has nothing to do with business, Mr. Higgins. The moment I spoke, he froze. Slowly, he lifted his head. Our eyes met. The color drained from his face. Lily, he whispered. I removed my glasses. It's Ellie Vance now. He looked around the enormous office in shock. The view of the city skyline. The expensive furniture. The awards on the walls. You built all this, he stammered. I crossed my arms. You chose a better life, Mark. I leaned forward. And now you're asking the woman you abandoned to save yours. Mark looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him. I didn't know it was your company, he said quietly. I laughed. Of course you didn't. Then I asked the question that had haunted me for years. Was she worth it? Mark didn't answer immediately. Finally he sighed. Lydia's father lost everything 2 years ago. That surprised me. Bad investments, he continued. The empire collapsed. And Lydia? I asked. He laughed bitterly. She left the moment the money disappeared. Of course she did. Mark looked at the floor. I made the biggest mistake of my life. I walked slowly around my desk. You didn't make a mistake, Mark. You made a choice. He swallowed nervously. If I don't get this contract, I'll lose my company. I picked up the contract folder. I'll give it to you. His eyes lit up with hope. Then I added something else. But under one condition. What is it? He asked. I leaned closer. You will personally clean this office every night. The hope disappeared instantly. You want me to clean your office? Yes. I smiled slightly. You wanted a better life. Now you can watch mine every day while you scrub the floors. The humiliation on his face was unmistakable. But he needed the job. After a long moment, he signed the contract. The first night he arrived at 8 p.m. The office building was quiet. I stayed late intentionally. Mark entered wearing a bright yellow cleaning vest. He kept his head down as he mopped the floor. You missed a spot, I said casually. Yes, Ms. Vance, he muttered. For weeks, this became our routine. Every night he cleaned. Every night I watched. And every night I reminded him of what he had lost. But something strange began happening. The satisfaction I expected never came. Instead, there was only emptiness. 1 month later, I hosted a massive charity gala in my building. The most powerful people in the city attended. Mark's company was hired to handle the event staff. But I gave him a special role. Serving drinks. In a tuxedo. The same kind he wore when he left me at the altar. The ballroom sparkled with gold decorations and crystal chandeliers. Mark stood by the bar silently handing champagne to guests. Then suddenly, a woman burst into the room. Her hair messy. Her dress wrinkled. It was Lydia. Mark, she shouted. The entire room turned. You're working for her? Lydia screamed. Then she pointed at me. After everything we did to her? Gasps filled the ballroom. Mark looked like he wanted to disappear. Lydia grabbed his arm. Give me your paycheck. I need money. Mark slowly removed her hand. For the first time. He looked calm. No, he said quietly. Then he walked her out of the ballroom, leaving hundreds of people whispering behind them. That night, Mark didn't show up for work. For the first time in weeks, my office was dirty. And strangely, I noticed. At midnight, I drove to the address on his business card. A small warehouse in an industrial district. Inside, I found him sitting alone. You missed your shift, I said. I quit, he replied. He stood up angrily. I can't do this anymore. You humiliate me every day. But the worst part, he continued. You used to be the kindest person I knew. Now you're just cold. His words stung more than I expected. I lost the only woman who ever loved me, he said. And now she's gone. Silence filled the warehouse. For the first time, I wondered if my revenge had gone too far. For days, I couldn't stop thinking about what he said. Eventually, I made a decision. I offered to buy his company and clear his debts. But when Mark came to my office, he refused. I'm leaving the city, he said. I'm going back to our hometown. I'll rebuild my life myself. Before leaving, he said one last thing. I hope someday you become Lily again. Then he walked away. And for the first time in 5 years, I realized revenge had never really freed me. A week later, I drove back to our hometown. The small church where he left me was still there. I walked down the aisle slowly. But this time, I wasn't the abandoned bride. I left the pain there. Then I drove to the small house we once dreamed of buying. Mark was fixing the porch. When he saw me, he nearly dropped his hammer. Lily? I'm not here for revenge, I said. I just wanted to see if the girl who loved this town still existed. He smiled gently. She does. 1 year later, the small house looked brand new. The porch was repaired. Flowers grew in the garden. I sold my massive company and started a smaller business in town. Mark and I took things slowly. We talked. We healed. One evening, he handed me a small key. The back door, he said. Not as a proposal. Just a promise that you always have a place here. I smiled. The bride who was left at the altar did get her revenge. Mark looked sad. I deserved it. But I shook my head. The real revenge wasn't humiliating you. It was becoming a woman who didn't need you anymore. I squeezed his hand. And now that I don't need you, I can finally choose you. And this time, we were building something much stronger than revenge. We were building the truth.